Welcome to the Setbreaker podcast. And today we have a very, very special guest. I have been waiting to talk to this gentleman for a very long time. Please welcome Mr. Stephen Pressfield. Welcome, sir.
Hey, thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I just wanted to, guys, you don't understand you don't understand who we have on right now. He's written. Okay, if you've heard of the movie The Legend of Bagger Vance, Mr. Pressfield wrote the book which led to that, and he's wrote a ton of other books: Gates of Fire, Tides of War, Last of the Amazons, and more. Recently, A Man at Arms. So definitely check that out. Okay, but the main reason why I wanted to talk to him is because of this special book right here, The War of Art. And as you can see, I have a bunch of tabs on here. I've underlined everything throughout it. This book has gotten me through. So I started pursuing my dreams about 2.5 years ago. And this book got me through the times I wanted to quit, the trials and tribulations. Just it kept me in check. And I would even after I finished it, I would read it every day for 10 minutes. Just to like keep me centered and remind me where I am, how I should think about things. And so I really wanted to personally thank you for making this happen.
Well, thanks, Mike. In fact, I want to ask you once we get into this, because when I originally wrote The War of Art, I thought it was for writers only. And the idea that like actors or comedians or something like that, or even photographers or dancers would plug into it. This sort of surprised me, and I really want to kind of interrogate you a little bit on what forms resistance with a capital R takes for you and your craft and that kind of thing. But you start it off, and we'll get into that later.
Okay, so you know what? Let's just we could just start with that real quick, just to
Okay.
Or how about this? Because there are going to be people here who aren't really quite familiar with this. So guys, basically the War of Art is, it's about breaking through your the mental blocks that get in the way when you want to create, right? And then resistance is, if you would like to explain what that is.
Actually, I'd like you to explain it, Mike.
In my way. Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully I do it justice.
Yeah.
Okay, so resistance is, guys, is anything that really just stops you from becoming your authentic self, you expressing yourself in the truest form, and just all the excuses, all the things we tell ourselves to literally just get on our own way. Because most of the time, people aren't really stopping us. We're stopping ourselves, and it's all in our head. And that's and I've been facing resistance, admitting who I really am. I'm 31 now. It took me to the age of 28 to finally begin to make the jump to my true self. And it was a scary move, but it has been the most rewarding. Did I do it justice? I don't know.
The only thing I would add to that is resistance with a capital R, I would say, is self-sabotage. It's those things that we allow ourselves to be distracted with. Procrastination is one of the greatest forms of resistance. Self-doubt is another one, where we tell ourselves we're not worthy, et cetera, to do whatever dream, to pursue whatever dream we have. It's anything, resistance with a capital R, that stops us from moving from a lower level to a higher level. And it kicks in, automatically and diabolically anytime we have a dream and we try to pursue it.
What he said. Yeah, the procrastination aspect, that just, I can't tell you how many excuses I made to stop me from, pursuing the stand-up comedy, the putting myself out there with the social media and the acting thing, just all of that. It was crazy. I mean, it literally got to the point where I was gonna off myself like 3 years ago. Like I was so serious about it that I just had no choice but to like look within and realize, wait a minute, like what's really going on? Like why? And I realize now that I've been this far into it too. It wasn't like I think deep down that inner voice, that voice of power that really like knows what it wants, it kind of knew like, look, you're not really gonna do it, but it took hitting a wall, like complete rock bottom, to just pure misery of just years and years of, you know, convincing myself that I'm somebody I'm not, to get to that point where I was like, okay, you know, I couldn't deny it anymore. Like, this is me. Like, yeah.
Yeah, the way I've heard it by, there's a wonderful article in the Guardian. I want it's too much to get into, but what the guy said was, echoing what you're saying, Mike, he said, when the pain of not doing it exceeded the pain of doing it, that he finally kind of changed. And I think we can all relate to that. And I think you do have to hit a kind of rock bottom. You have to get to kind of an all is lost moment when before you're willing to kind of make that huge change of really believing in yourself and really risking it, you know, really going for it.
Yeah. And so to go back to your first question about the whole stand-up comedy thing.
Yeah.
So originally the way I found out about your book was because of Joe Rogan. And when I bought the book, I would read it. And this is before I started to actually start pursuing it and admitting to myself and giving myself permission of like, this is you, do it. It didn't make sense. Like I would read the words, it like made sense, but it didn't make sense because it's like internally I was fighting it, because whatever, all my defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms, which allowed me to exist up to that point and with denial, wouldn't allow the words to sink in. But then when I started to get into it and then I put out to the world, I literally said, I'm a stand-up comedian, even though like I was scared. I said, you have to put it out there, right? Like just say it. And I started believing more. And then as I went through the whole journey, you know, with self-doubt, with a lot of self-sabotage, the words, it just like it sunk in, it resonated with my soul. It hit. And that was like a beautiful moment where I was like, wow, it was crazy. Yeah.
Well, that makes me feel really good, Mike. I'm really glad that you know, something that I put out there struck a chord with you and you know, gave you a little bit of a nudge at the right time when you needed it.
Oh, it was a perfect time. So, to get to your question, it helped with the authenticity of just because stand-up comedy is a lot of it is being like you at the rawest, purest form, right? And that's where the funny comes from, and that's where you know, it's about the truth. And people can tell when you're not telling the truth. They can tell when you're fibbing. They can tell that you're holding something back, right? And there was things I didn't want to admit on stage. I didn't want to tell people, I live at home with my mom, you know, like that type of stuff, right? Because I wanted to put on a kind of like a front to look cool for women or whatever it may be, people. And it, especially when I was reading the part about like when you wrote the Legend of Bagger Vance, people were saying, even your agent was saying that it's probably not a good idea. That's not what people want. But your soul was calling for it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like what I felt too. I no longer could keep up this lie of trying to look like this cool masculine guy, like, oh, he's got you know, he's got short hair, he's like, oh yeah, he works out. But the reality of who I am is I'm a silly, playful, you know, like guy, and I get scared. Like I don't want to fight people. Like I'm not that guy. So I put out more of that truth.
Mike,
which is kind of parallel to that.
Was there a specific moment for you, like an actual hour, an actual event that where you felt like a switch turn in your mind?
Yeah. So I actually wanted to quit for the first probably like almost 6 months. Every day I kept practicing, but every day I'd say like, what are you doing? What the fuck are you doing? Like why, like, you know, but I kept doing it because I knew something's eventually got to give. So, because when you're practicing in front of other comedians that are very jaded and don't care. You rarely get stage time in the beginning. So it's like working out in a dungeon, right? So then I was able to get the show at the 8-month mark. where I could produce the first show for stand-up. And then we sold it out somehow. We weren't supposed to even get it at, so we got a July 3rd date, and I think it was a Tuesday or something, but it just was like a bad day. And the person I was producing with said, hey, this might not be good. Like it might not work. But then, and I wanted to quit, but then the part of my brain, the resistance things, like no, action cures fear. Let's just do it, right? And then we get to the show. There's so many people, and then I go up, and then I actually got to do it because I didn't really get to do it in front. I only did one baby show before that, but yeah. Then I did that, and then did well, and finally I realized I belong here. Because you talk about it's better to be in the arena than not. Yeah. So that's when everything sunk in, and then it just validated. This is where I belong. Yeah.
Because you know who Brian Koppelman is?
Brian Koppelman? No.
He's a filmmaker, and actually the show Billions. He's one of the guys on Billions, but he's also done a bunch of movies, and he has a podcast. He has a great podcast that's called The Moment. And what he's into this exact thing we're talking about. And he asks people, what was the moment for you, when you kind of went from being an amateur to being a pro, or from running away from your calling to embracing it? And because he obviously has lived it too, and he's fascinated in what was that actual moment, So that was why I asked you that question, if there was an actual point in time where everything kind of turned around for you.
Yeah. And I mean, during that time up to the 8 months, it was, I could have quit at any moment. And I would have never even found out, right? And then, because resistance hits the hardest the closer we get.
Yeah.
And for you, what was your one main defining moment where you realized, okay, this is me. Like I'm truly here, and this is what I need to do.
Well, there was a lot of them, but the one that I write about in The War of Art, which I'm sure you know, was I happened in a sublet apartment in New York City, where I had been sort of running away from my own life as a writer for like 7 years, taking a million jobs back and forth across the country. And I had not sat down to a typewriter or a keyboard in like 7 years. And I thought, it's the worst thing in the world. I've only failed at it, And this one night I was alone in my little sublet in New York City. I was driving a cab and doing that kind of stuff. And I'd sort of reached a wall where I thought to myself, who can I call that I can distract myself? What woman can I call that I can go over and chase her? What friends can I call and get drunk? What things can I do? And I finally just said, I've had it. I can't do that anymore. I can't do it for another night. And I kind of pulled out my old typewriter, which is behind me here. Actually, it was a different one. And I just sat down for like about 2 hours. First time I'd done this in about 7 years. And I just wrote this. It was just a bunch of crap, that I just put on a page and I threw away immediately. And then I went there was a pile of dirty dishes in the sink. And I went out there and I started washing them. And I discovered that I was whistling, which I never do. And I realized that I was okay. That 2 hours of typing, even though it was completely worthless, I realized it made me feel good. It made me, instead of being this horrible thing, it was a good thing. And I sort of knew that something had changed my DNA, and that it might be 30 years before I could actually do anything good, which it just about was. But at least that I could now sit down at the typewriter and I would feel good at the end of it. I would feel like I was in my arena, So that was one moment for me. There are a lot of other moments, but that was one.
Yeah, because I think on that anytime because when there's dishes and I just don't want to do it, then when I make a video, or I get past that resistance where I feel really lazy, then I'm like, oh, the dishes. It's like it's not that. It's cool. I'm like yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Those
are moments and moments. That's for sure. It's not a one-time thing. I don't think.
There's definitely multiple moments. Yeah. By the way, if I'm being a little bit I feel a little awkward right now. It's not because of you, it's because I feel like um I have like a range of emotions because this literally changed my life. Like I'm here today because of your book. And I have a following now because of your book. Because it even affect it helps with the video creation. The times where I didn't want to say certain things, where I was afraid people would judge me, my followers would unsubscribe or leave me. But it was like digging at me. You know, I just creating, I think there's nothing worse than, it's almost like I'd rather not create than create with lies,
Uh-huh. Yeah, and
right?
I can
And then
actually tell
yeah,
from just the way you're talking right now, where you're relating to me, you are going straight into your authentic self, you know? You're admitting when you're anxious or you're, or you're nervous or whatever, which I bet you would not have done that like 3 or 4 years ago if you'd been, talking to me or whatever. So that's really great. I can see that you're coming, that's your source of power and authenticity. And that's your, the truth that you're getting at in your comedy. I know.
yeah, and the with the whole like growth of the social media, that came because when I finally got tired of trying to be this almost caricature of what I thought a comedian needs to be, and me almost being a slave to the result of how people will respond, like because I'm thinking
Yeah.
this is they want a certain thing. And then as soon as I put out the most truthful, vulnerable video, then the following started to come. Funny
Uh-huh.
enough.
Yeah,
Yes.
it does seem to work that way, doesn't it? I don't know why, but it does.
Yeah, why is it? I don't know.
I think because all of us, the people in the audience, anybody that's going to respond to your comedy, they have those vulnerabilities too. And they're scared, right? They have that sort of inner reality that they know about, that inner person that they really know is themselves. And they're sort of having a front too. They're putting on a front too, right? So when they see you up there being authentic, they go, "Oh shit, I'm just like that too." And in fact, the response to that is laughter, right? It's like, he hit the nail on the head, didn't he? He's telling it exactly like it is. I feel that exact same way. And you're sort of it's a release, right? It's a relief. Oh, and you laugh. And because it's true, the a thing that makes you laugh is usually something that's absolutely true, but that nobody has ever said before, right? Or ever said that way before.
That's 100% true. And I'm curious though. So even now at where you are in your career, you've done a lot of amazing things. How are you with resistance to this day compared to back then?
It never goes away, and it never gets any less. In fact, it gets even more diabolical and even more nuanced in the bullshit tape that it'll put in your head and play. Very convincing, very convincing. But the thing that I do have going for me at this stage is that I have many years behind me where I have beaten resistance, so I know I can do it. I know if I just keep sitting down at the keyboard and just keep working, that I'll get through it. But it never goes away. You never kind of, I always say you sort of have to slay the dragon anew every morning. It's always there. First thing we wake up in the morning, there it is. So yeah, it never gets any easier, Mike. Trust me, 30, 40 years from now, you're going to be dealing with the same shit that you're dealing with now.
But you know what? That's kind of comforting though. It's comforting in the sense that, you know, I feel worse in times where I feel like I have to be at a certain place by a certain time, or I have to feel a certain way. But when you just kind of tell yourself, that's just the way it is. Like you're gonna feel like shit, you're gonna feel like this and that, then it's just, oh, I guess it is okay. Yeah. I don't have to feel so bad about that. Right. And then even with my when I pursued it, I told myself it's probably gonna be like 10 to 20 years before anybody even cares about me. And I told myself that. And that made me feel better too. And as soon as somebody said, no, no, don't do that. Tell yourself like 5 or 3. And then that would make me feel anxiety and not good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like for me, just to cheer everybody up, I was like, whatever, 54 years old before I had a novel published. So sometimes it takes a long time.
Because I think you said you faced heavy resistance up to, was it 40 years old?
Oh,
or
yeah,
so,
probably something like
like
that. I mean,
extra.
it still remains. It's just that at a certain
Yeah.
point, I was able to overcome it, you know?
But how did you keep? I know the whole, taking action and then that's how you fight the resistance. But like, that's that's a very long time
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
to never give up. Like, that's really amazing.
Well, part of it, I think, was, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Mike, was I really didn't have a plan B or nothing that was going to work for me. I would try from time to time. I'd say, okay, I'm getting a straight job. I'm going to do this thing. Forget it. Forget this dream of writing. But I would be so depressed at the end of the day, whatever I was doing, that I just had to like sit at the typewriter and try something. And the other aspect of it was that at a certain point, like I guess I was in my 40s or something, I had a career as a screenwriter. I finally kind of got a little career going, kind of a C-level career where I wasn't really doing my absolute dream, but I was kind of in the arena, and I was learning my craft. I was learning what a story was, and I was making a little bit of money. I could pay the rent so that it wasn't like it was total failure every day of the week. I wasn't quite there, but I was getting there, so that encouraged me. And even when I would write it, I would like work somewhere, save money, quit, take 2 years, write a novel. Nobody couldn't publish it. Nobody wanted it. And I did that like 3 different times, but each time, I had hope. I thought, okay, I got some money. I'm going to do, and while I'm writing it, I had hope, and that kept me going. And also I realized that I was learning, little by little, I was learning the craft a little bit. So it wasn't like for me, just abject failure day after day after day. It was kind of an incremental thing where I was pecking away at it. I was getting there a little bit. Um, I'm sure you can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's like that with the comedy thing too, because I was bombing constantly. I was always up there just nervous and just looking at people's faces and just seeing them just like unimpressed. And then yeah, whatever, guys, right?
Uh-huh.
Whatever, right? But what I saw was I did notice that over time, the the flurry of emotions, that inner doubt and that tornado, just I started to I could tell I was starting to go towards the center of the tornado,
Uh-huh.
where
Well,
that's
that's a
right.
good way of putting it.
Yeah, yeah. I could feel it. I could tell, and I could tell those small moments of time, maybe for that like 10 seconds where I felt almost invincible,
Uh-huh.
and then the rest of the 4 minutes 50 seconds, I felt at the mercy of the audience. But
Uh-huh.
I saw that one little that 10 seconds
Uh-huh.
that let me know that
Yeah.
I could live in that.
And then you go back to that 10 seconds and ask yourself, right, what was the essence of that? What did I hit in that 10
Mhm.
seconds? In fact, let me ask you, Michael, how do you get your material? How do you know? Do you actually sit down and write out a routine and then memorize it word for word? How does it actually work? How do you find your material that you think is going to be your 5-minute bit?
So the way I do it is I'm very observational. I think on my life, I look at how I view the world and what
Uh-huh.
um because we all have different perceptions of an event, right? Or how people act in society, and I we all have our own unique take on that. So I try to bring that to stage, and I've spent there's been times where I would in the beginning where I would write things out because I thought that's what I had to do because I would hear other comedians talk about it. But then I became very robotic. I became too systematic with it, and it didn't allow my true self to come out because the way I am is I'm very spontaneous, and I just
Uh-huh.
like to just go with the flow in a way. And the way I do it is I have a little premise, a small premise. I'll write it in my phone, like something that I think is interesting, and then maybe write like one or two sentences with that, and just go on stage and discover,
Oh, really? Wow. So it's
yeah,
sort of like
and figure
improv
things
for
out.
you, huh?
Yes, and actually, I started with improv. I did improv for 2 years and got onto a team, and that actually helped me. Uh, it prepared me for stand up because what I learned with improv is that when you're on stage with people, you think of something that you think is funny at that moment, but then people keep talking, and then it'll be maybe 20 seconds later, and in your mind, you still think it's of that like high value, it's going to be hilarious, and then you say it and it makes no sense because the time has gone already. So you have
Wow.
to learn to let go of this thing that this
Ah,
your ego telling you this is so important, and pay attention, actively listen, and support the other people, support what's really going on right now, and try not to be so funny. Try to just live in whatever world has been created,
ah.
and that's where also the funny comes from. So that taught me as well, to just be here. Don't think that this, because when you tell yourself on stage at doing stand up, oh, if I say this, they're gonna die at this moment. But there's been times where there's a joke I have that does really well. It wouldn't hit because I'm coming from this place of enslavement to the idea of what I believe the result has to
Uh-huh.
be. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I noticed like sometimes, just as an audience member, I'll be watching a comedian like Dave Chappelle or something like that, and they'll even pause, right? There'll be like 20 seconds where they're not saying a thing and people are still laughing. It's just whatever look he gives or something, or he shrugs, and I've seen it with a bunch of comedians too, which really shows to me that they're really in the moment. They know that the joke or whatever they've just said, it might take a few seconds to kind of resonate, or people will start to think about it a little more, and then they'll laugh again. And he knows enough, or the guy who's on stage, the comedian knows enough not to follow it with another joke, let it kind of sit there for a minute. And I imagine that comes from being so in the moment and looking at the faces and feeling the room. And you know that, there's another explosion of laughter coming if you just let it happen, if you just wait. So I'm sure it's a great thing. I mean, my hat's off to anybody that can get up on stage and try to make people laugh. I mean, that's the most scary thing in the world that I can think of, because it must be just the most horrible feeling to be dying up there. And you're like a bullfighter with the bull, right? You're that like one moment away from death at every second, right? 5 minutes is a long time. I don't know how somebody like Eddie Murphy or somebody gets up there or Chris Rock, and they do like 60 minutes or 90 minutes. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. I mean, I recently headlined and I did my longest, which was 17 minutes. And
Wow, that's a
yeah,
long
yeah,
time.
yeah. And the guy, so he saw me do a show 2 weeks ago, and he came up to me after because apparently I did well, and he's like, "Hey, look, I know you headline everywhere, and I would like you to headline at my show." And I was like, and in my mind I said, I never headlined before, but okay. So like a part of me wanted to say no, I can't, but then that's resistance. That's me getting in my own way. Like the discomfort will reveal the truth of what, like, you have to be in those moments to show what you're made of. And I agreed. And the first couple of minutes were a little rocky because I get in my own head, and then
Uh-huh.
but later it got better. But yeah, the whole Dave Chappelle thing, it's so interesting because I've been finding the power of silence, just standing up there. And sometimes I'll just stand and stare at everybody, like I'm not afraid of you, and just
Uh-huh.
smile, and they'll slowly start smiling, and they'll
Uh,
all kind of start chuckling and laughing. It's an interesting response to,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I don't know, but so you write a lot about with your other books going to war, essentially,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm curious. I'm curious where that comes from. What draws you to that?
Well, one of the things that I believe, and this is probably true in comedy too. Uh, I'm a big believer in the muse, in a level of inspiration beyond us. And the books that I've written mostly are set in the ancient world of, the Spartans, the Athenians, Alexander the Great type of thing. And when I wrote those books, when I first started writing them, it was like I never planned that in a million years. I never thought in the world that I was going to do that. It was a total surprise to me. I was just sort of called to do it. And I was amazed when I would read it, how good it was. So like, how can I do this? So, I don't really know anything about that. But I do think that the writer's world, the writer's inner world is so lonely and so scary that in a way you have to be kind of an inner warrior. You have to have the same virtues that an actual fighting soldier has. Courage, patience, the ability to kind of run to the sound of the guns, that kind of thing, even though it's just on a page, you're not really in danger or anything like that. But that sort of warrior mindset, that's why, the title, The War of Art, actually came from my partner, Sean Coyne, my editor and partner, was his title, but he's absolutely right. It's the war of art. Just what you're doing. Your art is comedy, and it's a war, right? You're scared to death. You're as scared as any soldier. It's like going out of the trenches, right? Go over the top, run into machine gun fire when you have to get up in front of people and make them laugh. And you need those same virtues, belief in yourself, a belief in the audience, an empathy to reach across to the other side, and the willingness to undergo, to take the blows, to get up there and bomb and die, and then get out again the next day and do it. So that's the nearest I can guess to answer your question. I really don't know why. I was just drawn to this type of story, and I still am. And it just it surprises me as much as anybody.
But I can relate to that because I do approach that. I actually talk about this to my comic friends a lot, but nobody really gets it. I tell them about the warrior spirit. I tell them that before I go on. I actually talked to my friend about this 2 days ago on his podcast too. I said that before I go up, I feel like essentially a Spartan going against an army of Persians, or just like I'm alone. I really am alone, because I am alone on the stage, right? So I in my mind I tell myself I'm ready to die every time before literally I convince myself I'm ready to die.
Yeah.
And people listening could think that's a little odd, but that's why I relate to you with what you said, because it's so interesting, isn't it? Because nobody's gonna come up there and stab me with a spear or impale me, but in my mind, it's like I'm against 100 people, and I'm willing to die the way I'm gonna die.
Yeah, I relate to that completely. In these movies like gladiator movies, like the movie Gladiator or anything like that, Spartacus, where they do a thing where it's sort of in the equivalent of the green room for the gladiators, right? They haven't gone out into the arena yet. And there are a whole bunch of them kind of sitting there, some have swords, some have tridents, some, there are different pairs of fighters that are going to go out. And the filmmakers always kind of show their faces, right? And, each guy is going deep into his own head, in another 3 minutes, 10 minutes, I'm going out there to face my possible death, right? And I would bet if there is such a room for comedians, that's what they look like too, that they're kind of, they're gearing themselves up. In fact, I was watching a movie last night called Riding Giants. Have you ever heard of this movie? It's about surfing. It's about big wave surfing. Laird Hamilton and those guys with these 50-foot waves. And there was one of the guys was talking. He was like, great surfer for like 30 years. And wherever it was that they were surfing this particular day it was like death to go out there. And he was talking about how he was just sitting there waiting to go out into it. And he thought, I can't do it. It's too dangerous, And then he just said to himself, okay, it's a good day to die. And then he went out there. So he went through that sort of same process. And I think that, it's a warrior process, and I'm sure that there are guys that are Congressional Medal of Honor winners that if they had to do stand-up, they'd be pissing in their pants, They could run into machine gun fire, but they couldn't get up on a stage and try to make people laugh. It is terrifying, That's why my hat's off to you, Mike. If you can do that, God bless you. You're a better man than I am. I could never do it.
No, but I feel like writing is such the same thing too, because it's you're putting your soul and your essence into each and every book. You're literally trading your life force, and you can spend. I don't really know how long for I'm sure it depends on each person, but you can spend years for it to just kind of kaput in a sense, right? And so that whole thing,
any sort of venture like that. Like imagine if you and I were opening a restaurant, and we had to go through like first of all, the years of developing the cuisine, whatever it is, learning how to do it, going to the bank, getting a loan, clearing it with the city, getting the permits, finding the place, getting the decor. And then we open the doors, right? And that's the moment of like utter terror, right? Is anybody going to come in? And when they do come in, are they going to like it? The first time they take a bite, I'm sure we're sitting in the back, just, wetting our pants, are they going to, are they going to, oh,
Just
this
watching.
sucks, we're never coming back to this place, but it's anytime we put ourselves out there, of course, it's scary, have you ever heard the term exposure in mountain climbing? Have you heard of that?
No.
This is really interesting. It's like, exposure in mountain climbing means when there's a big drop underneath you. Like if you're at 10 feet from the summit of Mount Everest, but if there's a shelf of rock beneath you where you could land, you're not exposed. You're safe, right? If you fall, you just fall on the shelf and you're okay, right? It's only a 2-foot fall. But you could be 10 feet off the ground at the very bottom of a mountain somewhere. But if there's nothing underneath you, then you're exposed, because you can fall. And that's sort of exactly what comedy is about, or writing is about, or any kind of entrepreneurship thing. You're exposed when you go out there. You can fall, and particularly when it's something that you absolutely love and you're sharing something authentic from your soul, you're laying that out there. And if people just piss on it, that's pretty bad, So it takes a lot of guts, takes tremendous amount of guts to do that. But that's what being your authentic self is. And what else is there in this life except to do that?
And then you feel stronger the more vulnerable you get, the more you put out your authentic self with the criticisms. As you see that, yeah, it can get to you. But what I've noticed is over time, it bothers me a lot less. And then it empowers me. And I feel like okay. So I feel like we're really resonating here on the thing, like with kind of combat and warrior spirit type aspect. So I feel like maybe there's something like this with you in writing. But for me, the way I view when I'm on stage with the what is it? Like when I would bomb, that this is how I thought of it. It was like an analogy, metaphor, whatever, that whenever I would bomb, it like if you compare to jiu-jitsu, you're trying to not get tapped out so soon when you start off. You're trying to take longer before you get tapped out, right? And that's how I would view the bombing aspect. Like, how far can I go before I bomb? I'll bomb like that right away. And over time, I was like, I'm bombing less, so that means I'm able to like figure out how to jiu-jitsu my way out of it. And then with the jokes, the way I would do the jokes is when I'm going for like an armbar, right? Because the jokes, we have to keep doing the same joke over and over to figure out the funny in it. It's not just, oh, boom, it's a complete joke. You have to work at different angles, the cadence, the energy, just there's a lot of variables to it. So it was like trying to joke on stage is like going for an armbar, but you just learn the armbar, so you're not able to really like sink, like even get it and hold it. But you keep trying, and you learn different angles with the joke armbar. You start to get it in. Also, I now I'm kind of hold the arm, but I'm not able to really like get it in still. But then you get to the point where you finally are able to sink in the armbar, and then it just clicks. You're like, oh, I got this joke now. I get it. It's not perfect yet, but like, this is the joke. This is the submission. I'm gonna make them submit. You know, I don't know if you feel.
Yeah, I mean, it must be a really interesting thing to be able to lead an audience. To feel the room. I mean, I've never done it, so I'm just sort of imagining myself into it. Because to feel the room and to know when I would imagine in a great set, you really feel like you're absolutely in command of the audience. And that you can, and not only that, but that you're giving them pleasure. You're taking them on a trip. They're going to walk out into the night and go, that was fucking great. Mike, Kim, I got to, that kind of thing. Now, because the weird thing about being a writer, of course, is you never see the reaction, right? You're writing and then you put it out, it becomes a book, people experience it in their living room, and you never get the feedback unless somebody tells you in person, So in a way, what you have as a comedian is really great. I mean, you get that instant, immediacy of the feedback that tells you, oh, you did it. You got the arm bar or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's that's a great reward that you don't get as a writer.
Yeah. So what for you as a writer, when if we were to compare, when is this quote unquote like reward aspect of it all? What is that
It's
shaping point?
that's a great question, Mike, because it's really one of the things that I say a skill that you need to evolve as a writer is the ability to self-validate or self-reinforce. In other words, to pat your own back, because nobody else is going to do it. So you have to, at the end of the day, and even in the process of writing for a day, you have to sort of recognize when you're on it, when you're doing good. There's no audience. You're the audience. You're your own audience, and you have to sort of give yourself a hand. At the end of the day. But it's not. It's obviously not the same as what you're getting a lot from a live audience. But in a way, it's sort of a Zen thing in a good way, where you're sort of self-contained in a way. You have to ask yourself, was this a good day? And if it was, to reinforce yourself in just telling yourself that was a good day. But yeah, you don't get it. You don't get that feedback. People don't do it except long after the fact. And I'm sure it's the same for an actor that's in a movie or a director that's in a movie. Finally, the movie comes out and the actor and the director, they've already onto 3 projects beyond that. They've forgotten what the movie was. And people come up to them and go, oh, you were so great in whatever. And they go, oh, yeah, really? Oh, well, thanks a lot. And they're sort of embarrassed. But it's not the same as what the instant feedback that you get as a comic.
Yeah, I like the instantaneous feedback of that because it lets me know when I'm messing up on more than anything. But there is also it's kind of like a double-edged sword because then a lot of comedians, they depend on that laughter, and when they don't get that laughter, and that's their only medicine in life because they haven't learned how to deal with their internal whatever's going on, it leads to some really
Yeah.
dark stuff.
I have a question for you, Mike.
Yes.
My accountant has a lot of comedians that are his clients. And he was telling me one day how I could write off my medical expenses, if I had my own corporation. And he was saying, yeah, he says, all my comedians, they write off all their psychiatrist expenses. They're huge. So what I wanted to ask you is, what is it about being a comedian that it seems they're troubled people that are kind of working? Why are those people who make us laugh? Why is there a sort of an inner darkness? Can you explain that a little bit? Or
Yeah,
is that even
so
true?
it is true actually. For majority comedians, I that is the fact of the matter. So even for me, I had really tough childhood, and the only time I felt normal, I didn't feel safe in my home. I just never really felt good unless I was at school around my friends, and I would do anything I could to make them laugh because if they laughed, that it was a mixture of them validating my existence, which I wasn't getting at home, and something positive to where we're both able to feel good. So I was literally willing to do anything to make my friends laugh, even at the expense of my, me getting in trouble by teachers
Uh-huh.
and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But so I used to feel that I started too late with everything at the age of 28, but I look at that as a blessing because I had that time to start to understand myself in the other areas, like work on my brain, work on my childhood trauma as well, and that's where comedians really get fucked up in the head because they don't reverse engineer all that stuff to heal the base issues, right? So they're basically building a skyscraper on a weak foundation, out of
Uh-huh.
sand essentially. Some of them sand.
Uh-huh.
It's really that fragile. So that's the unfortunate. During Corona, I know there's a few comedians who off themselves
Yeah, I was going to
because
just
there
ask
wasn't
you, like,
stand up.
what about Robin Williams? Do you have any insight into, I mean, who was ever funnier than him? And
Yeah,
yet,
he was a
how could
genius.
do you have any insight into, I mean, just even guessing what place he was in that made him take his own life?
I have a few thoughts. What I know of him around the end was he had some kind of degenerative I think like brain disease or something like that. And he
Oh,
knew he was slowing down. Like he
oh,
knew he wasn't the same.
ah,
And when your whole identity and your whole career and everything you are is based upon
yeah,
who
yeah,
you are, like Robin Williams, the funny guy,
yeah.
like all that, and that's his where he gets his joy from. It's almost like why. And I'll be honest too. I thought about it. I thought about this a few days ago too. I thought, I think I'd rather die. Like if I lost my voice,
Uh-huh,
I think I'd rather die.
uh-huh,
Like because this is everything. The
uh-huh.
same with you. The reason why you're here and you've been in the arena for so long is because there is no, you burnt the boats, right? There's nothing else. To me, literally, I tell everybody this. I tell everybody there's nothing else left for me on this earth. And I mean that with every ounce and inch of my being.
Ah,
This is it. I'm here till I die.
uh-huh,
So I think that's why Robin Williams, uh, I think that's why he did that.
ah,
Plus,
interesting.
unaddressed things I assume that he hasn't really, because he was famous for so long. I don't even think he had time to look within and just be in silence, because you need that
Uh-huh,
silence to really kind of figure yourself out, you know.
ah,
And I think that's the power of like writers too. Like you are alone with yourself, but then you come to these type of introspective conclusions and observations that anybody else who was doing something else where they have to deal with people where they're always on their phone, this and that, would
uh-huh.
not come to, I
Yeah,
believe.
there's truth to that. Let me ask you another thing, Mike. Do you feel in some way that your comedy, that you're working out some kind of issues in your own life in any way? Do you feel it's a form of therapy in some way?
Yes, yeah, because I was like I said before, I was always afraid to say certain things, you know,
Uh-huh.
living at home with my mom, like this and that, and then but then I turned it into funny. So there's a thing I say where, yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm 30, I'm 31, I live at home with my family. um uh, I say that because if I say I live at home with my mom, then you guys are gonna think I'm a little bitch, because there's a difference between family and mom, and
Uh-huh.
I get deeper into
Uh-huh.
that. But it's seeing that people still accept me for whatever little insecurities I have. It empowers me. So I try to make myself quote unquote look bad on purpose,
Uh-huh.
and that's what helped with the internet stuff, because that's what built my audience, and the more I put out my imperfections and they still embrace me, that's it. It's healing the past of where my father and my whole family. I was a black sheep of my family growing up. My parents are from
Uh-huh.
Korea, and they just they didn't understand the whole, like my earliest memory is my mom saying, "Stop trying to make people laugh. Nobody will respect you."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Ah, ah, that's very interesting. So it's really sort of what you're talking about, if I'm hearing you right, is kind of self-condemnation, right? That some voice in your head from wherever you came from, your family or whatever, sort of said to you, if you're that way, in other words, your authentic self, that's bad, 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 bad. So if
Yes.
you now can be that way and people applaud and they say, oh, that's good, 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 then that is a way sort of exorcising that voice of self-condemnation, kind of saying to yourself, well, that was bullshit. Why did I ever let that bother me? So that's interesting. That's great.
That's
I never
100% true.
thought of that, how it was worked, but I think if you say it, that must be how it works.
No, it definitely is, because the other earliest memory I have of my dad talking to me, I think I was 6. He asked me what do you want to be when you're older, and I said a comic book artist. And then I'm 6, and he says, "There's no money." Dude, I'm like, how am I so every time I had these expressions of who I am, and as a child, you talk about it too. It's just that's how we're born, right? That it's just kind of inherently within us. Just like a puppy has their own, each puppy has its own temperament. Each puppy has
Yeah,
its own personality in a sense. That nobody taught
yeah,
the puppy to be that way.
yeah.
So when my dad kept shutting me down with just tons of other things that was like who I the creative stuff I would want to do. He was essentially telling me, you don't have a right to exist. Your existence is faulty. And that's what slowly that seed over 28 years of my life led to me eventually, like, wanting to like leave the earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet, if you think about it, Your dad was doing that out of love. He
Yes.
was thinking, I want my son to have a career that he can be secure in. If he chooses this crazy career being a comic book artist, it's going to lead him to heartbreak and misery and everything. I don't want my son. I love him. I don't want him to go down this path that's destructive, you know? So we might sort of look back and say, oh, I wish my dad had a broader view of it. But my dad was the same way. My dad grew up in the Depression. So here you had this terrible fear that the economy could completely crash. You'd be in the streets selling apples, you know? So his dream for me as I was coming up was that I would find a job that was absolutely secure, you know, that no matter what happened, there would be a need for it. So when I actually went to college, I got into college as an engineer because in my dad's mind, that was a really secure job, right? They're always going to need mechanical engineer, whatever, whatever. And like the first week I was in college, I switched to English. I switched my major to English for no reason at all. I didn't know why I did it. And that was like a huge thing in my family. It was like my dad thought, oh, just like you. He thought, English, what's going to happen? This guy's going to, what is he going to be teaching English? You know, so it was out of love that he wanted me to have a career, but I took it the other way, just like you. So it's good to bear that in mind that our parents are not really bad people. They love us. They just wanted us to not go down some dark path in their
Yeah.
mind.
No, absolutely. Yeah. It that definitely took a long time for me to figure out, but it gets easier. It got easier as I allowed myself to do and live the truth. And actually, I was able to forgive. My dad died 10 years ago, and I had this leftover resentment that never really went away. But I was actually able to fully forgive him about 3 weeks ago, and that's
Ah,
because I'm in such an authentic, joyful place. Yeah, I don't really make much money, but I'm able to live the way I want to live as me, and that allowed me to see more clearly of, not cutting the way I view the past with all this the pain, resentment, kind of a little bit
uh-huh.
of that narcissism, like the world revolves around me type of
Right, right.
viewpoint, to actually go to his grave and just talk to him and truly grieve. And now I'm able to rebuild the relationship in a new way, because I would avoid going to visit him because of that, past shit that
Yeah,
was there.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had kind of a similar thing with my dad. My dad died before I achieved any success at all, not even
Mm,
close. I mean, in his mind, when he died, he was thinking, oh, my poor son, Steve, the guy's gone down the toilet. He's gone farther. I feel so bad for my son. I didn't raise it, whatever. And I wish that, he could have lived a little bit longer just to see me get a little bit of success because I really wanted to kind of do it for him in a sense. So it's weird that you have to kind of commune with the spirits, to have that. But I do believe you can do that. And I believe in that. So, maybe that's wishful thinking, but I hope that my dad can, that I somehow can connect with him and communicate that to him.
I believe that as well. For you, similar question. With you, writing and continuing to, because I feel like every book you're just, it's like just this thing, muse, right? It's probably the
Uh-huh.
muse, higher spiritual type of activity. Does that also help you come to terms with certain things in the past, or come to terms with certain things with yourself, maybe fears of the future, just all that stuff? Does it do that for you when you're writing?
I, I'm not sure. I don't think it does. It doesn't, I wouldn't say that it does it as sort of a therapeutic thing, where you say, oh, you do this in the present and it sort of heals something from the past. The closest I can come from that is just to say that when I think about things that were painful for me in the past, to just sort of dismiss them. Like I say, I was just in my own ego too much so that it caused me pain when really it was nothing at all. Like if it was something with my dad, he really wanted the best for me. So why am I agonizing over that? I'm really sort of one thing about when you're following your own muse is you're living in the future and you're living in the present, which is good. You're not looking back. You're living that day, and you're living, if you're working on a project like a book, you're living in the future to finish that book. It's a little different than comedy, I guess, where it's a kind of, you're there that night and you're doing your show. when you're writing a book, you're doing like a 2-year, 3-year project, but you're, I don't know if that's an answer, Mike, but I'm not, it doesn't really heal anything directly. But I think, just like you said, because you're being authentic in the moment, it's like, who cares about the past? There's no point in worrying about that or letting it drag you down.
No,
It's
that
like
makes
you've
absolute
gotten
sense.
beyond it. You've got achieved escape velocity,
Yeah.
you're out in orbit.
Yeah, because I feel like we hold on to those things from the past, and in the perspective of how we felt in that moment, even if we were like 10 years old into adulthood, because it's almost like we don't want to let it go. Because if we
Yeah.
let it go, then that's letting go of who we think we are right now. Because we feel like the past defines who we are. Because
Yeah.
everybody needs an identity. And without identity, who are we? We get afraid, we feel
Yeah.
lost, right? So I believe that's a big factor of it as well.
In fact, let me go a little step farther than that. I think when we hold on to the past, it's a form of resistance with a capital R. It's a way that we have our of self-sabotaging, because the more you're stuck in the past, or finding your identity there, or dealing with problems or issues from there, the less you can go forward into the future. Unless you do something like what you're doing with comedy, where you're kind of mining your past for humor or for insight, but then you're not really living in the past. You're going forward, but you're just kind of, mining it like a vein of gold that you can use in the present. But I think living in the past is a form of resistance, and I did that for years and years and years, and it'll kill you.
What would you say was one of the biggest past type of resistance thoughts that really was getting in the way? One of them.
It's a great question. I think it's just a sort of a self-limiting concept, in the sense of, there's a voice in your head saying this: you are only good enough to go so far. If it's a football field and it's 100 yards long, it's okay for you to go to the 33-yard line, but not any farther than that. That's your limit. You're not good enough to go beyond that. And I suppose that comes from childhood and the fears that your parents had for themselves and for you. So that to overcome that and to be able to say to yourself, well, fuck, I can go the 50-yard line. I can go all the way to the end zone. That's a huge, and I'm still struggling with that too, but I'm beyond the 33-yard line anyway.
That's so interesting that no matter how far we get, that's always kind of just going to be there. It's interesting because we adapt also to the level we get to, right? So we almost forget how we felt when we were at the 15-yard line.
Yeah. Yeah. I have, General Jim Mattis, who is the Secretary of Defense. You know who I'm talking about? He's a Marine, 4-star general, amazing guy. And I'm friends with him. And I asked him one time, and he didn't give me a real answer about this. I said, because I know he came from kind of a blue collar background. He was like in jail, and he became the absolute tip top #1 kind of warrior. I said to him, how did you expand your self-concept? From when you were a lieutenant in Vietnam, or you were a captain, then suddenly you became a general, then you became a 4-star general, then you became Secretary of Defense. How did you, expand it? And he really didn't have an answer. He just kind of evolved. Maybe he was already at the beginning capable of that, but he just had to allow himself to do it. But so I never really got an answer for him, but it was kind of like the 33-yard line and the 50-yard line, and then all the way to a touchdown, and then right out of the stadium, So, but it is interesting. How do we expand that self-limiting concept to really go all the way? It's kind of amazing. I don't know. I don't really have an answer myself.
It makes me think of this. Before Corona hit, there was this one show I had to do where it was a paid gig, and we don't get paid very much at all in stand-up.
How much do you get paid?
Jack shit. Like I got for that show I did. That's the most I ever got paid. The one from 2 weeks ago for headlining, I got $60. Okay,
Really?
But most of the time,
Wow.
you're getting paid shit because we just
Wow.
need the stage time. We'll do. In fact, the first year, when I went on stage 300 times, like 99% of that being open mics, just practicing, I spent, you're paying $5 to practice for 5 minutes in front of comedians that don't give a fuck about you. Not to mention the gas money I was spending, where it's about 20 to 30 miles one way. So I spent about $1,300 just to get on stage. So, and that's not counting all the other finances. But yeah, so that's, you have to really like what you do.
But to put the other side of it, Mike, I know I interrupted you with what you were going to say. We'll go back. Let's get back to that. But and the other side of it is what you're doing on stage, what you're being allowed to do on stage is such an amazing thing. And such a high level of evolution, of psychic evolution, psychological, emotional evolution, to be able to do it. It's worth it. It's worth it to pay them whatever you have to pay them, for that moment, because you're like a bull a bullfighter in the bull ring, and people would pay whatever to do that. You get to face that bull and really do your thing. It's an amazing thing that you do. So, but I didn't know they paid you so little.
You're right about that too.
Lucky to get that,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm like, really? You want me to do that? Okay, all right, we'll do that.
Do you at least get a free meal out of it, or a few drinks?
They want to give me drinks, but I don't like drink. I never drank one time before going up. I refuse to do that because I want to feel all the emotions, so I learn and so I know how to maneuver what's going on. Because if I numb that, then it's gonna make me. I'm not gonna be as sharp. I'm not gonna be able to connect. But but the money aspect though, I'm fine with it because I look at myself as my own stock, and I'm literally going all in with the stock of Michael Kim, because I can see the projection of it. Yeah, there's ups and downs, roller coaster, but I do believe. Something's got to give.
I think of it exactly the same way, Mike. It's like sometimes people, along the way will come to me and say, do you want to invest in this stock or this bond or go into this business? And I say, absolutely not. I say, I'm willing to bet on myself. If I'm going to take any risk, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm not going to bet on Tesla or, whatever. I'm betting on myself. So and my attitude is exactly the same as yours. And I think it's a really smart attitude too. You're putting the stock of Mike Kim. That's the stock you want to put all your energy into.
Yeah, just like stocks, it dips, goes up.
Yeah.
But when you hold yourself accountable and you tell yourself, I made the decision to invest on my own, who can you blame?
Yeah.
Who can you really blame?
Yeah.
And that's freeing. That's because I think misery comes from when we feel like we had to listen to somebody or people and then made a decision based off of that, and then we point fingers at them when it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
That's what I believe.
Yeah. It's like, how lucky are we, you and I, to be able to do the thing that we love? It's a risk. It's a total risk. But on the other hand, we're not working in a coal mine. We're not driving a taxi, or maybe we are, but at least we get to do the thing that we were put here on the planet to do. Let me ask you another question while I'm interviewing you.
Yeah. I think it's your podcast.
Where do you see yourself 5 or 10 years from now? I notice that a lot of stand-up people become actors or do movies or stuff. What do you see yourself going forward into something, or are you just taking it a day at a time?
I see myself being a working comedian, actually getting paid to, actually being able to make a living off it. And I have obviously have a podcast, and then getting my podcast to a level where I can get sponsors and just really reach out to a larger multitude of people. And acting, of course, but the social media stuff and then the stand-up is at the top of that, because I like being in control of what I do. And I don't like banking on, like, I already gave up on Hollywood. When I thought I wanted to be in Hollywood, it affected every decision I've made and what I said, because I thought he's too, he said this, he said that, let's exile him. And that was, I think, a form of resistance as well. And once I got that, I said, fuck Hollywood, I don't need that. Then it freed me to really be and say what I want to say, to get to the next level. So there's that. But I also want to, I care a lot about helping not even just the younger generation, but just people in general with what I've learned with, like the psychology and self-development, and tell people kind of just figure their own selves out. So that's something I want to do as well. Yeah, to share what I've learned and everything.
Okay, good answer.
Is that a good answer? I think that's like outside of just myself, besides just like a selfish goal. But then again, isn't it still kind of selfish to give because it makes you feel good? I don't know.
It's a good kind of selfish.
Yeah. It's by the way, I've been thinking this whole time, you have really good skin. I was like, hey, this skin is good. What the heck?
Well, nobody ever said that to me before, but thanks a lot.
Do you have like a skincare routine, or is it just
no?
You just water?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I never even thought about it. Yeah.
You know what I think it is? I think it's because you're happy doing what you want to do. So there's this youthful kind of glow emitting from you, this calmness about you, where you're just, I'm here and I'm cool. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that, Mike. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, no, you don't have to say anything. I know.
Okay.
just embrace it. Just take the thing. But let's see. So with what you've been doing, is there like another goal? Is there another higher level of maybe not achievement, but some of the things that you've been kind of looking into doing as well, on top of the writing?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm sort of, I see myself as a servant of the muse, and whatever she tells me to do, whatever the next book is or the next thing is, I'll do that. I'm just kind of following that, and I know that there's a sort of an evolution. Sometimes an analogy that I use to sort of inspire myself is I think about like the albums of Bruce Springsteen, however many there are, like 20 something, whatever albums. And from way back when he was in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And, each one kind of followed the other, and they all are very Springsteenian, only he could have done them. And now I'm near the same age as him. And so I have a career kind of about the same as him. And I look at him and I think he's going to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Now he's on Broadway, or he was on Broadway. He's doing some whole other thing now. And I figure I'll just sort of follow whatever the next project is. The only thing that is a little bit of an evolution for me is I realize that now, at the age that I am now, that people are perceiving me a little bit as a mentor or as an elder figure type of thing, whereas I feel like I'm still 22 years old and I'm an idiot. That's my sort of inner view of myself. And so I'm having to sort of evolve into that new archetype a little bit, and I'm really not comfortable with that yet, but I can see that that's coming, or that's already happening. But it'll unfold however it unfolds, and I'll just try to sort of stay on top of it.
I like that you said that too, because even at the age of 31, I feel younger than I was when I was like 22. Like, I don't know what it is. Because people are starting to call me sir now, and it's kind of weird, like kids. I was like, really? I don't know.
Yeah, they've been calling me sir for a long time. Yeah.
For a while.
Really, Mike, from what you've told me, you were really reborn a few years ago. So you're really you're really only like 4 years old, if you want to think about it, or however long it's been.
I tell people that all the time. I literally feel like I'm living for the first time in my life and reborn from like the phoenix, from the ashes. And yeah, I feel like I'm in the infancy, and that's the beauty of it. That's why I'm so excited for the future, even without the money and all that, because it's not even about that. The intrinsic value that I get from all this is completely priceless, and this is the type of stuff that you cannot buy with no matter how much money you have. It's impossible to
Yeah.
just to feel this and to come to this, you know, coming to being of the truth with money. You can't purchase it. It's
Uh-huh.
impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. If I can, I recommend a book of mine that I don't think you've heard of. It's called The Artist's Journey. Have you heard of this?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it though. The artist.
I think let me recommend it to you. And the reason I say this, it's kind of a follow up to the War of Art. It's like the fourth book after that, and it's really about just what we're talking about. Like the concept of the book is that we have two journeys in life. The first one is the hero's journey. It takes us, like in your world, up to the point where you really commit to being a stand-up and to being authentic and to really revealing yourself. And then at that point, a new journey starts that I call the artist's journey. And at that point, it's like figuring out the question we're dealing with is, what is my gift? What was I put here for? How do I get in touch with that gift, which would be your comedy or whatever you're going to do? And how do I get better at that as I go along? And I think at that point, you sort of leave the hero's journey behind. You already done it, right? It's that point where you were reborn a few years ago, and now you're an artist. That's your job, right? You're a comedian, and whatever evolves out of that. You're no longer a guy that's searching and stumbling around and walking into walls. And if you're at home with your mom, that doesn't nobody gives a shit about that. You're on your artist journey now, where you're like the Blues Brothers. You're on a mission, you're on a mission from God, and nothing's going to stop you. So it's a good book, The Artist's Journey. It's sort of like the War of Art, but a little bit farther along. I recommend
I'm
it.
I'm literally gonna get it today. Uh, you said something super interesting though. The hero's journey is done now. So,
Yeah.
because I feel like most people they'll say the hero's journey is like your whole life, right? But that's interesting that. So you're saying the hero's journey is to the point where we figure out who we are as the hero, and we know, and we don't have to. So the hero's journey is kind of like more of the struggle to the coming of who we are, the truth, right?
Yes, that's how I would
Okay.
describe it. Like in
Mhm.
in the classic hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell version of it, um, you're kind of lost through the whole thing, right? You're struggling, you're encountering allies and enemies and this and that and the other. And then the end of the hero's journey is you finally come home, like Odysseus came back to Ithaca, but you're a changed person, right? And they say in the classic hero's journey, you come with a gift for the people. And at that point, I would say for somebody like you or me, the hero's journey, at the end of it, you've kind of found your calling. It was like the moment with me when I sat down at the typewriter and I said, okay, I'm a writer. Okay. And then the rest of it is like, okay, now what the fuck am I going to write? And how am I going to organize my life so that I can finance this, so that I can be a professional at it, that I won't be buffeted by the winds of fortune or whatever, that I can master my craft, I can learn all the things you need to do, and then find out what my gift is. What story should I write? What kind of things? It's like your comedy. What is it that I was put here to do? And at that point, that becomes the artist journey. And now it's pretty much of an internal journey. It's a journey and I think now we do a million heroes journeys where we go from every day, from our head to our soul and back again. Another little hero's journey where we're afraid, we go into the darkness and we come back. Um, but it is a different journey once we're on that artist journey. Another parallel might be if you were an alcoholic and for your whole life you're in denial that you have a problem with alcohol. And finally, at some point, you hit bottom and you say, yes, I can't control this. I have something that's controlling me. And you sort of say, okay, I'm going to AA. And from this point on, I'm never touching anything again. And now you become a recovering alcoholic, right? And it's a question of, well, now how do I live my life? I've fucked up things with my family. I've blown it with my kids. How do I put that back together? I'm reborn. I'm a new person. And of course, the mantras of AA are the same mantras, I think, for you and me. One day at a time, and
Yeah.
it never gets any easier. And we give ourselves a little coin. Oh, we've had a year of sobriety. Oh, great. Okay. But we're trying to find out who we really are and how to be the best person we can be.
Mhm, mhm. That's a great analogy on that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And the whole thing of AA of that it's a kind of a communal thing and we're giving back, when we get up in front of and we say, my name is so and so and I'm,
Mm.
and I'm an alcoholic, and then you tell your story of your failure while it's healing to you, but it's also a gift to everybody that hears it, because just like your comedy, because people hear it and they go, oh man, this guy's is fucked up, he's more fucked up than I am, and look how he got it
Yeah.
together. So it's encouraging, it's a gift, which is the same thing. Your comedy is a gift and what I write is a gift, at least I hope it is.
No, it absolutely is. Because just, reading the parts about how, that's why I appreciate your transparency in the war of art, because you tell as it is about nothing really happening for you for decades, right? And for me, when I thought I was like, oh, 20, fuck, it's over. And I'm like, no, you know what? I'm okay. So that was a gift that you gave me, and I know a ton of other people, because I have a lot of people, but I made people buy this book. I said, if you don't like this, I will buy it off you. I tell everybody.
Well, thank you, Mike. That explains what it's spike in my sales.
I guess I did something. Yeah. So this next question, we don't really have to get into if you don't want, but I am curious. So with all and you talk about it in the book as well, the resistance that you went through. So basically, I had a relationship die while on there was a 2-year relationship I had, and halfway through is when I figured this stuff out, and then it just kind of went. But I still faced resistance along the way, but it just right. So you talked about there was some, with your resistance, like relationships, that there was some issues with that and things like that. So I don't know, how is it now? You like how I'm tiptoeing around it? I'm like trying to be careful.
I'm not sure what exactly the question
Yeah,
is.
I'll just be straightforward. So how are things since you've gotten past that resistance with like your family? Because there was relationships that didn't work, and you have kids, and right.
I don't have kids, actually.
Oh, you don't have kids? Okay, I made that up because you're very like fatherly. So I was like, oh, he has to have kids. Okay. But you had relationships with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as far as like with my parents, unfortunately, my parents both died before I could really sort of heal those relationships,
Yeah.
So that didn't really work, except in the realm of imagination. But definitely, I feel like I'm a much better person in a relationship, than I ever was before, because before I had these terrible demons of self-destruction, self-sabotage, and if at the start of a relationship, if I felt like I ought to warn the woman, don't mess around with me because I'm bad news. I've got demons that are going to pop up at some point. I may seem charming at the moment, but don't hang around, And so definitely it's a different thing. I mean, now I might be hard to live with because I work so hard, but I am my authentic self and I'm doing what I was put here to do. So that helps a little bit.
Okay, that's good, because I feel like we're very similar in that, where as soon as I start to, well, I'm not saying you said this, but as soon as I start to kind of develop some kind of feelings, I feel like it's going to just sabotage me, and I get scared, and then I push them away. I'm like, no, you're resistance. This relationship and this love thing is just me trying to like avoid what I really got to do, and so my brain is it's dead. The whole relation. I've never been in a healthy relationship. I don't know how to be in one. So that's kind of something I'm trying to. I'm just lost in.
Yeah, I don't have any great advice to that.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's certainly true that many artists or comedians or entrepreneurs that really had it together in their professional world have had terrible personal lives, ignored their children, blah, blah, while they were producing great work. So I don't even know what the answer to that is.
That seems to be the common denominator too. And I feel like when I was in a relationship too, me wanting to, feeling like she was almost the enemy. Literally, I felt like she was the enemy. It sounds crazy, but because she would say, "Baby, you need to sleep. You haven't been sleeping," and then I'd be like, "No, you don't understand. I have to do this. And then my brain's saying like, "You really want me to lose? That's why you want me to slow down." Yeah, so
Yeah, there is a lot of that.
yeah, that's just a personal problem. Definitely. Yeah. I was just flashing back on it. Do you like to watch movies? Do you watch movies?
I do. I love to watch movies. I watch movies all the time. Yeah. I watch movies like 10 times the same movie, not back to back to back, but, over the course of years.
Okay, yeah. Because you like to watch those movies because it's kind of like when you rewatch it, you gain a little something new as you got further in
Yeah.
your experience with
Yeah.
life, right?
Yeah.
What's one of those movies that really does that for you?
Top of my head, Seven Samurai, Lawrence of Arabia,
Mm,
Chinatown, The Godfather.
Godfather.
Um,
What are your thoughts on Gattaca?
Gattaca, the movie.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Uh-huh.
I've never seen it. Is that the one where they execute people when they're 30 years old, or is it something else?
No, it's the one where it's in the future where they no longer judge people based off of their race and all that. It's down to the genetic coding.
Oh, yeah, I
So if
never
you're in
saw
an
that one.
yeah, that one I think you'd really like because that's the
Is that
one
with
the one I
Ethan
watched
Hawke?
every year. Yes, that's the one.
Ah, uh-huh.
Yeah, there's a fuck. I
Well,
don't
I'll
want
have
to
to
ruin it.
watch it now.
Yeah, yeah, that you're gonna like that one a lot. Hold on, let's see. Do you like Lord of the Rings also?
That's another one I've made, you know, not really, no. I mean, it's okay, but I'm certainly not a Lord of the Rings fan. I mean, if you sat me down in front of it, I'd find an excuse to watch The Godfather or something. But
Okay,
I
something
see
something
what
less
people see in
fantasy.
it. I see
Mm,
what people see in it, but that's the one with Frodo and everybody.
yes, that's the one.
Yeah,
Okay, let's
yeah,
see.
yeah,
Oh,
not one of my faves.
you still have your Largo keychain?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's not even a keychain. In fact,
Uh,
can you see me here? Can you see that?
oh,
Yeah, it's
okay.
just sort of a an ID tag on my little sweatshirt here.
Kind of there.
That's from the War of Art, as you know.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, there. Okay, so there. Before we wrap up, there was something that I wanted to get your thoughts on, or a few things. So, um, you posted on your Instagram about we're very very us versus them, especially as of late with politics and everything, right? And you were talking about how it's like we shouldn't it shouldn't be a thing to do that because I feel the same way. Like I don't stand by any specific political side. What I find more important is who they are as people. Could you go into that a little bit more about what you were saying on the video?
Um, I think what I was saying, I've said a few things about this, but I
Yeah.
certainly feel like anytime we have, well, let me go back a little farther to the origins of tribalism. If you go back to like the early primitive man, the primitive hunting band, or the first tribes, if you think about like American Indians and the tribes, the Cherokee, whatever, across the country. Like if you think about the name that the Navajo had for themselves was the Diné, which means the people. And almost every tribe has a name like that. And what's implicit in that is that they are the only people. They are the people, this tribe, and everybody else is something else, subhumans, devils, whatever. So the sort of tribal concept which we can really see now in Afghanistan. You think about the Pashtuns and so on and so forth, the tribes there where if you're an X number tribe, you're totally loyal to your tribe, and every other tribe is the devil, right? And now we've fallen into that, and that mindset goes back tens, hundreds of thousands of years. It's deep in our DNA. It's not something we choose with our rational brain. It's deep. Even if you're like a Raider fan or a Lakers fan, you're like a crazed, person, right? For your own team, right? Although fortunately in that case, we recognize it's a sport and, it's not be all and end all. But I think anytime we get into that mindset of us versus them, we're in a primitive state. We're in a state that nothing good ever came from that. And I think that as one evolves and gets older and sees more of the world, you start to move beyond that us versus them point of view, and you have a more inclusive point of view, and you start to be able to look at the person that you considered the other or the enemy, and you start to be able to say to yourself, well, they're a human being too, they love their children, they only want the best for their families, they could be my friend if I would only let them be, or they would let me be. And then you're coming from a whole broader, deeper, more mature place. And the United States is a real young country. We're an adolescent country, and we're a bunch of idiots. Tell the truth, we're a bunch of idiots. And so we're stuck right now in that us versus them psychology. Unfortunately, certain politicians have found that they can use that divisiveness. I won't name any names. It's pretty obvious what I'm talking about. And we will, start fighting each other, So I think we've just got to get beyond it. We've got to find a way to be inclusive once again. And I do think we're getting there. It's hard to see, but if you look back you watch movies from like World War II, and you see that they are total white man's movies. I mean, if a black person appears in one of these movies, they're like a shoeshine boy, and they're being completely dismissed, right? Or they're a maid, and you never even see an Asian person. They don't even exist, right? Or a Latino person. So how much farther, or gay, forget about that. That's like totally off the charts, right? And we don't even talk about like trans, forget about it. So we've come a long way in that at least those players are in the game now. They're visible, they're in the game. And that's what the whole backlash is against that. It's like, oh, get these people out of here. We want to go back to 1951. But somehow our brains are expanding a little bit. We are becoming more inclusive. And, like the whole thing with gay marriage, where like 3 or 4 years ago, even Barack Obama was against it, right? It took him, he had to like, quote unquote, evolve to get to the point, oh, I guess a gay person really is a real human being, wow, what a mind fucker that is, So, but then it became kind of embraced almost overnight. I mean, even in states that you would think would not embrace it. So people are changing a little bit. There's a backlash against that. I know, like there's that LGBT, whatever it is, and that the House passed it, but the Senate is resisting it. In any event, I do think we are evolving beyond that us versus them mindset, and we have to, because we're going to destroy this planet. We're on the brink of destroying it right now. So I don't know if there's any hope for us, but we got to get beyond that tribal mindset that comes from our early evolutionary past and is deep, deep, deep in our bones. Sorry for getting up on a soapbox, but that was, you asked the question.
Hey, I knew what I asked. I embraced it. So that ties in with the you talk about the fundamentalism, right?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentalism is tribalism to the max. You kind of go back to your people, right? They have eyes like me, their skin is like me. Ooh, we all believe the same thing. And what unites us is we hate the other guy. The great say, we hate them, when of course the other guy is just, in that case, it's us, it's you and me. We're the other guy from some of the, fundamentalist things.
I feel like it's only gotten worse during Corona, because we're not around people like we were before, like people that we would,
true,
right? Like in situations or places where, like maybe somebody's afraid of a certain group of people, but they just happen to be there, then you're going to be less afraid because you have to be around them. You get kind of desensitized to your own crazy thoughts. But now we're on our phones, we're controlling our whole world through the virtual device and being on these forums with other people that think the same way. And it's just, you're right. And the mental health is kind of degrading a bit too, because everybody's inside and all that.
Yeah. And it isn't just Corona. It's really the algorithms of Facebook and stuff like that, where the only things we see are things that reinforce our little silo view.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like here, you and I were in Southern California. So, which is like one of the all-time diverse places in the country, right? You go to the gym, you see every possible race, ethnicity, whatever, and which is great. You're just, and eventually, not even eventually, you don't even see any differences. You can't even tell because everybody's, so mixed in together and nobody gives a shit. You're all here doing the same thing.
Yeah, everybody's just trying to get jacked. That's all they care about.
Yeah. Just trying to get high,
Yeah, what are you just trying to, get laid, whatever. Fuck. That's what unites all of
I
us. We're
think our
just trying to make
conversation
love.
is degenerating a little, Mike.
Yeah, I know, right there. It went from there just to like let's
Yeah.
go from spirit like high level to just let's get stupid, guys.
Yeah.
let's get foolish here. But no, that there's a lot of truth in that. And uh one more question before we get to the final thing. Do you like, how often do you actually like to hang out with people? Because what you do, you like to spend time alone, and I mean I do too as well. But I'm curious as a writer, what that looks like.
Well, of course, the COVID situation changes everything.
Mhm.
But I mean, my normal pre-thing is I would go to the gym first thing in the morning. So I'm hanging out with a bunch of people that I, know and, hang out with them. And I would always go have breakfast with a few friends of mine and hang out with them. Come home to my girlfriend, Diana, we'd hang out together. And then in the evening, we would go out to dinner or something like that. So, but through the main course of the day, I am by myself, I am sitting at the keyboard, but I'm more social than I think I am. But I'm definitely, an introvert. I'm a solitary type of dude, and I live a lot of my life up in my head. Yeah.
Mhm. Do you, since you are, you write books and stuff, do you also like to journal to get out your thoughts and kind of make sense of things as
No,
well?
I don't do that. I mean, I've heard people do that, and I think it's a good thing. But sort of
Yeah.
in my real writing, I kind of do that. The other thing about you say, well, are you hanging out? If I'm writing a book, if I'm writing a story, like I'm going to plug my book one more time. If I'm writing this new one, A Man at Arms, all day long, I'm with the characters in that book, and they're people. They're real people to me. I'm hanging out with them. I'm in their heads. So I really feel like I'm having a really social experience. It's just in the imagination.
Hmm.
And a lot of times those people are realer to me than the people in my real life,
Mm.
which makes sense because where do those characters come from? They come from your unconscious in one way. They arise because you're dealing with certain issues in your own evolution, even though you're not conscious of what they are. And so the characters kind of arise almost like characters in a dream. You may have a character of a warrior, a character of a witch, or a character of this or that. And they are like characters in a dream. They're aspects of you that you may not understand until 5 years later. You look back and go, oh my God, that character, I didn't know that was important to me. But so I do have a rich social life in my own head.
Hmm. Hmm. But I think that ties in with self-love. And actually that reminds me real quick of something that I did want to bring up is you talked about how you're gonna lose people that like friends, family
Yeah.
that,
Uh-huh.
and you were right. It was so lonely for the longest time. And I think 90% of people kind of left my life for whatever reason. They didn't like, they felt weird. They're like, oh, how are you? I'm like, I'm good. And they're like, okay. They kind of didn't like that I was getting happier. They didn't like these
Uh-huh.
things. And it was very lonely, I would say, about like a year or so. And then I just started really making friends who want me to win.
Yeah. 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 I think
Like truly.
that is a common phenomenon of anybody that kind of gets on the path, their true path. Um, have you seen the movie The Fighter starring Mark Wahlberg?
Is he
Uh,
is he the one that's fighting or
he's fighting, but also he has a brother who was a fighter. His brother was played by, I'm blanking on his name, but it's a famous Academy Award winning guy. But
Mhm.
the movie is The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg. He stars as the fighter, real fighter, Mickey somebody. And it's really about his whole family. He has like 7 sisters plus a mom who's his manager and his brother. And they're all trying to sabotage him. They're all like this. The first scene of the movie, Mickey Ward is his name. It's a real guy. The first scene of the movie is his mom organized a fight for him, and she puts him in the ring with way out of his weight class. He's like fighting a guy that's like 15 pounds heavier than him, and the guy just massacres him, you know. And the whole movie is about the self-sabotage of the people, or not the self-sabotage, the sabotage of the people closest to us, sabotaging him. And the story of the movie is he finds his girlfriend, played by Amy Adams, and she is like a true champion for him. She believes in him. She's not out to sabotage him. She wants to help him. And it becomes like the two of them against his family. And it's a really terrific story. Another movie by the same filmmaker, David O. Russell, is Joy. I don't know if you saw that, with Jennifer Lawrence as this woman who invented the miracle mop. And it sounds crazy, but they're both great movies, The Fighter and Joy. And in both cases, it's about a family trying to sabotage. Like in the movie Joy, it's Robert De Niro is their dad, and there's a whole bunch of other people. They're all like trying to sabotage her as she's trying to fulfill her real destiny. So I highly recommend them both. You'll relate to them completely. The Fighter and Joy, both by David O. Russell.
David O. Russell. Yeah, I'll 100% check that out. Yeah, and it's funny too, because with my family, they didn't get it, and they still kind of don't fully get it. But because I've been so steadfast, and they see a change in me and the evolution of my confidence and my sense of self, they've just finally accepted it. However, definitely in the beginning, especially my mom too, it felt like literally everybody was against me, the closest people, you know. But
yeah. But you know, it's not that they're bad people. And I write about this in The War of Art too. It's not that they're that they're evil people or anything. It's this is my theory. They're dealing with their own resistance in some way, and they're unconscious of it. There's something in them that's their calling too, that they're probably not living out, right? And on some level, they're aware of that. So when they see you living out your calling, it becomes a reproach to them. They say, hey, if Mike's doing this, why aren't I doing it? You know? And so then they try to like bring you down. And, you know, they try to say things like, wow, you're not who you used to be, Mike. You know, we remember we used to hang out, we get loaded, we go down to the beach, we do this and that, and the other. And what's the trouble? Now you're going away. You're writing, you're doing your stuff, you know, what happened to you? And they say that in a bad way, like something bad happened to you, you know? But it's just their own resistance that they're unconscious of. And that's why when you make new friends, the new friends you make are people who are following their calling, right? They're not deep in their own resistance. And so just like they're hoping that they themselves can pull through this and do good, they can't help but root for you. They say, this guy's on the same path as me. And when I hang out with Mike, it helps me, you know? We're on the same path. He encourages me, I encourage him. So I think, you know, you lose old friends, but you make new friends. It's a tough passage, but it seems to be universal, happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm. And now I feel like these are friends that are going to be there for a long time. And
they're your real friends.
Yeah, the real friends. So, I mean, it's so cool to see that, you know, reading that book, and then that came to fruition later. Like, all just this is guys, get The War of Art, okay? The War of Art, and also buy A Man at Arms. And right before we wrap up, is there anything, that little bit of advice or wisdom, or just something maybe you even haven't thought about recently, that you feel like you would like to share to the audience?
Okay,
it's super vague and broad, I know.
Well, you know, there is such a thing as the hero's journey that we were talking about, the journey you went on. And I think one of and it's sort of a law of nature that we're all going to have to do our own hero's journey. There's no way to avoid it. And one of the aspects of the hero's journey is that you don't know you're on the hero's journey. You're completely all you feel is you're sort of lost. you're banging into walls, you're unhappy, you're miserable, you're thinking about killing yourself, you're blowing up relationships, you're going nowhere, you're broke, you moved back in with your mom, whatever. And you think the last thing you think is, I'm on a hero's journey. This can't be a hero's journey. This is just bullshit, horrible, it's crap. But the fact is, you are on a journey, and have faith in it, even though you don't know what it is. And I say this from absolute experience. It will be taking you somewhere, and there's no way to avoid it. And there will come that moment, if you keep going, where you will, unfortunately, you'll hit bottom. It's going to be really bad. You're going to wind up, whatever. But then things will change, and it'll all start to make sense. So if I would say anything to anybody that's young and kind of struggling, as I was for years and years, take some pressure off yourself. Don't beat yourself up because, oh my God, I'm 29 years old and I haven't found my calling. It'll happen. For me, I was 50 whatever years old. So let me be an example that you're at where you want to be, wherever you're doing.
All righty. And would you like to plug in any, social media or websites or anything?
Only just if anybody wants to find out about this new book or anything else, a Man at Arms, just go to my name, StephenPressfield.com, and everything is there about me and about everything. The one thing on this website now, it's a splash page. It's plugging the new book. But if you sort of click on the X in the upper right-hand corner, it'll take you to the underlying website that's more about the war of art and that kind of thing. There's a whole other thing about, the war of art and all my other books in that area. That's
awesome. Well, all right, guys, you have heard it from the man himself, Mr. Stephen Pressfield. Again, make sure to get his books, okay, because they have changed my life, especially the war of art. And guys, this has been another episode of the Setbreaker Podcast. And until then, see you next time.